Hello, hello, hello. We are going to be making pincushions today, and it is going to be an absolute blast. I have the three that I have finished right here. So if you are making the black one, we'll wait for a couple more people to join us. But here's the plum. Here's the harvest color, and here is dusk. I haven't finished it yet. And then I have my bubble gum in pieces. So I'm just kind of showing you this while we wait for people to. I'm going to do it start to finish today, and hopefully you can learn some things along the way. Today I am going to be making the Azure Sky. So if you are making it with a kit, it should look like this. And then you also got a little packet of puff, and I have my packet of puff back here, right there. So we will get to the puff at the end. So I think we can probably get started. We've been on for a couple of minutes. Let's just go ahead. So you'll want to start by opening a packet, and we're going to pull out what's inside. So inside of your packet, you are going to have some low volume 2.5-inch squares. You're going to have a strip of fabric that looks like this. That is going to be your border at the end, so you can set that one kind of aside. And you're going to have the pieces, your main pieces for your star and your chain. So those are here. So we are going to start working with the other pieces in your packet. I'll just kind of go over what's in there. You, of course, have your full color paper pattern. It is going to take you from the very beginning steps, how to cut it out, to the very end. And while it may not seem like very much fabric, it really packs a punch. And on top of that, you are going to have a scrap. So when you are looking through your 2.5-inch by 4.5-inch pieces here, one of them is going to be cut a little differently. So you can choose which one to cut differently. And the reason for that is if you make a mistake later on, now you do have a scrap to go back and cut an extra piece out of, which is why I did the pattern the way I did it. So for this one, I really love the contrast. Contrast is really the name of the game when we are working with these scrappy pieces. So the contrast between this piece and this piece and this piece are very good. You can see that there's a lot of contrast between those three, and that this one, there's a good contrast, good movement, but I feel like it's not as strong of a player, me, in this group of four. I love them all together, and I'm going to really like the star. So it's not that I don't like that piece, but you choose the piece that has the least amount of contrast with another piece, and you'll just set it aside, and that is the piece we will cut slightly different. So those are going to be my primary pieces, and I am going to line them up just like this on my cutting mat. And you know what, since I chose to do the blue colorway, I'm going to flip this over so that hopefully you can see it just a little bit better. A little more contrast there so that you can see how I'm going to cut this out. I am going to stack these three pieces all at once, and I'm going to cut them all at once. The first thing I'm going to do with my rotary cutter is I am going to cut off the edge at the left-hand side because I'm right-handed. We're just going to slice that off so that that edge is extremely nice and even. It is just like the tiniest, most negligible scrap. It is garbage. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my 1-inch by 2-inch pieces very carefully. Okay, so I'm going to line up my 1-inch line here on this left-hand side. And it's going to be, people asked about how to get accurate piecing. When you're working with these really little pieces, we want every piece to be precise. So you really want the fabric to disappear between one side of your black marking line and the other side of your marking line. You don't want it hanging over, and you don't want it just slightly too short. You want it very, very precise, and you want it precise at the bottom and precise on the left-hand side. And I'm going to cut all the way up, and then I'm going to cut, oops, they came apart. They don't normally do that. We are going to cut very precisely now this way. Okay, we are going to work on really precise little cuts to get these really precise little pieces, if you can see what those look like. Okay, so I'm going to cut out the rest of it. If you'll join me, we will just get this really nice, really even. I'm going to straighten the bottom. I think it's pretty straight, but just in case. And this mat is a little bit grippy compared to some of the other mats that I use. You'll also notice I am not using the lines on my mat, and I never ever do, and I don't recommend it. The lines on your mat are not nearly as accurate as the lines on your ruler. So you really want to be using your ruler lines. So now we've got 6 of our 2.5 inch by 1.5 inch squares, and now, or rectangles, and now we're going to cut our 1 inch squares. Okay, and we're going to be really precise here. There's one set. Okay, and then we're going to cut our second set just like this. Okay, so this is track, I would say. Okay, we're going to probably throw out this entire pile. But I did want to make sure that you guys would get really, really precise cuts. Now I'm going to stack these right here, just like that, and we are going to cut 1 inch squares. Okay, I want them really, really accurate. So there's my group of 1 inch squares. And then I'm going to cut from this piece. If you're working with your Azure Skies piece, you can really make your piece very unique or really pop by focusing on these florals and how you want to cut them. You do not have to cut them exactly the way I said to cut them in the pattern. You can choose different things. So I'm actually going to focus on some of these flowers and hope I don't make any mistakes later. That's going to be my thought right now. And I'm going to cut going this direction. You can do what you think is going to yield you the best results based on the print that you're working with. And that is something you definitely want to consider anytime you're making a pattern is, the cutting directions don't necessarily, when I send you cutting directions, I try really hard to make sure they work with the print because you're working with a kit. And sometimes, especially in these videos, I will show you if there's something that's a little bit unique. But now, honestly, because of how we're going to cut off these corners, I'm not sure I'll be able to get much of those flowers. But we'll see. We'll see if I can get a flower or two. This one will be much better. This flower will be centered right in the middle of the piece. And it's going to look really great. Do you see that? Okay. And then while this is considered scrap, I am going to cut myself 1 2.5 inch or 1 inch square. I don't know, 2.5 inch. And I think I'm going to cut it from this piece right here, these little tiny flowers. And this is called fussy cutting, where you can see the motif through the ruler and you can kind of make a choice on what you want it to look like inside of the pincushion. I'm going to pull that back. And so now I'm going to have some flowers right in the middle of my pincushion. So that one is going to be part of my group. Okay, and I'm going to set this aside. You can see I have a scrap if I do something wrong or if I can cut another piece for myself. So I'm going to set it a little bit aside and I'm going to put all of those pieces there. And now we're going to cut these 2.5 inch squares. I'm going to pile in half. Okay, just like that. I'm going to straighten one edge, just an absolute sliver, like that. And that's going to go in my garbage pile. I'm going to straighten my bottom edge just a sliver too. Works better if the blade is out. I'm sure I'm the only one who's ever done that. Okay, so I'm going to pull away. My dryer is done. I don't know if you could hear that. And then I'm going to cut myself my squares here. And you want to have a good amount of pressure on the ruler so the fabric does not scoot. And it looks like I did not cut that as well as I would have liked. So I'm going to straighten that edge. Yeah, see, you can kind of eyeball some of these things and say, oh, that's not accurate. Now it is completely accurate. I'm going to cut it in half. Okay, we're going to do the same. Cutting is like 50% of the accuracy piecing. The other 50% is going to be in your actual piecing with your seam allowance. That's going to be the other big like difference between accurate and inaccurate piecing. All right, now let's, and even as small as these pieces are, you're going to be shocked how forgiving they are. Okay, there we go. And generally the smaller your stitching, the more accurate you need everything to be. Okay, so I'm just going to shave off that edge. And I'm going to shave off this edge. Okay. And hopefully you can kind of see how I'm working here. And I'm going to cut myself my last 1-inch squares. I will show you one other thing in just a second that I have already made, and you may want to make one before you stitch your pincushion shut. And it's something I've shared in my pincushion tutorials before, past, and it is this little bag of rice. It's just a little scrap of fabric, and it's filled with about 3 tablespoons, maybe 4 tablespoons of rice. And it adds a little bit of weight to the bottom of my pincushions. And you don't need much, and it doesn't need to be very big, but it is going to make it a couple of things. One, so your pincushion weighs a little bit more and doesn't just fly off the table. And the other thing that it does is it prevents you from self with pins, because it adds like a little bit of resistance there. When you put your pin in the top, it doesn't go all the way through to the bottom. So when you pick your pincushion up, you don't stab yourself on the bottom like that. I really, really, really hate that happens. Okay. Let's do this last little cut, and then we are going to get into our piecing, and I'm going to show you how I chain piece this so that it goes really, really fast. If your iron isn't already plugged in, you may want to take a second and plug it in and make sure it's hot, because we're going to piece very quickly, and then we are to get back to it. So these are the pieces you should still have left that you have not touched yet. You have the bottom of your pincushion, you have the backing for the quilted portion of your pincushion, and you have your batting. And then you also have this little strip, which we are going to measure and cut for later. So right now we're going to take our 1-inch squares, and we are going to take our 2-inch by 1-inch rectangles. And we are going to start piecing. So see if we can move the camera over here, and I'm going to show you kind of how I do this, so that I don't have to constantly move back and forth between places. I'm going to take my 1-inch piece, and I'm going to take a 2.5-inch, or 2.5-inch, I keep saying that, a 1-inch square. And you can definitely kind of like determine as you go along what you like best. Combinations you think look really good next to each other. I think this one looks just fine, but you may have preferences, and definitely use that. That is your innate sense of art telling you how you like things to be. So we're going to pair those two up. We're just going to put the little 1-inch square on the 1-inch by 2-inch square. We're going to feed it under our machine, and we are going to stitch corner to corner. When it is so small like this, it's pretty easy to keep it straight. But I do have a piece of tape that I always make sure my arm is pointing towards that tape. And we. I was hooked to Wi-Fi. Is it unfrozen? How long has it been frozen? Is it working now? Oh, good. All right. So I don't know how much. Start over from where you left off. Okay, so I left off over here. We were cutting these 1-inch squares. Okay, and we have cut. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it did that. But we have cut these 1-inch squares of our blue, or whatever color you're working with, and the low volume. You can see that there's a significant difference in the number. And then we have our 1-inch by 2-inch strips. And we are going to go chain piece these so that they go together really, really fast. And you don't have to move away from the machine much at all. We are going to need a pair of scissors between now and the time we head to our iron. And if you didn't hear me, I did say make sure your iron is hot because we are going to be using it very shortly. So we are going to be placing a 1-inch square on top of our 1-inch by 2-inch piece. In case you can't see it, just like that. So they're going to look like that. And definitely use your own personal preference. That is the art. This, you are going to pick which prints you think look best together. And then we're going to sit under our machine with the corner right underneath the needle. Actually, we're going to place it a little further than that because my machine will eat it if I put it with the corner under the needle. And you're going to sew corner to corner. I have this piece of tape. I don't know if you can see it, but the tape tells me where right under the needle is. And so I'm going to keep this other corner pointed at my piece of tape. So here's the tape that I'm talking about. It has been here for years, but I keep this corner pointed at this piece of tape. So it's definitely going to go through nice and straight. Okay, so once I've gotten that one done, I'm just going to keep on going. And we're going to match this up. And we're going to do all 4 that go this direction first. And it doesn't matter, in your pattern, I have you go one direction first and then switch to the other direction. You can start with whichever direction you want. You just want to make sure you only do 4 of them. So we're going to keep going with everything going the same way. Nice and straight across. And now I have 3. When you talk, it's harder to keep track of the numbers. All right. And they seem so little, but they make such a big impact. Okay, so there we go, underneath there. And just nice and straight across. And now we're going to switch. So I have 4 left, and we're going to switch directions. So now everything's going to go underneath my needle, going this way. And if you are looking at your pieces, when you lay your piece down, I mean, this is how, I don't know how nitty gritty you want to get into this, but the piece that is pointing towards your colored piece, okay, the corner of your low volume that is pointed towards the colored piece is the piece you're going to keep when you open it up. So if there's a particular part of the print that you really love and you want to make sure is in your pincushion, that is something you're going to pay attention to. Okay, so we're going to, on this particular print, there's not anything specific that I'm like, oh, I definitely want to make sure I keep that. It is something to just kind of be mindful of. Let's see. And I like to kind of look at the combinations as I go along and just say, okay, I think I want to make sure that there's a little bit of pink next to this one just to keep it popping. But you may not like that. I love pink. And you may think, okay, I want to focus on the blue portion of this print. And I don't normally stand up when I sew, so it's kind of a bit of a learning curve. And see, with this one, I'm like, do I love the pink there? I think I want to do a little bit different kind of contrast. Let's see what else I've got. I think I like this one, and I like the word cake, but I also really like the art. So I'm going to turn the cherry art. So this little print, I don't know if you can see it, has a little tiny cherry up here, but it has the word cake down here. And you can just get a totally different effect by how you place the print on top of your strip. Okay, and we're going to keep going. And I'm not using my finger in any particular way. It's just the one that is the most dexterous to do this. Feeling a little weird about that, actually. Okay, there we go. So this is, we've already done all 8 of those. And so now we're going to with our little blue squares. And the first 4 are going to be a little separate from everybody else. And the reason is I'm going to make these the middle. And I'm just going to kind of remember that in my head. These are going to be the middle of my little 9 patch blocks. So we're just going to match them up.
How'd you pick the middle ones again?
Oh, I just picked the first 4 off the top. That's one of each print. So that the middle of the sonnet block that we're making. And when I tell you the middle, let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, we're talking about this print here that's going to be in the middle of the 9 patch. And I want it to be varied. I don't want it to be the same print in every single middle, so I just picked one of each of the prints. So we're just going to match them up, and we're just going to keep in mind that that is what they are. I find telling myself things like that to get to the point where I need to actually remember it helps me. So we're going to feed those through the machine one at a time with a nice low volume, and we're looking for some good contrast. Ooh, I know what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this one, I think. Very close, but I like the way that that plays here. Okay. We'll put those together and feed them under. And another one. I like the mix of the like little floral with the text. In all of my kits, I almost always include text prints because they add texture and they honestly read like a stripe most of the time. It's kind of like a textured stripe, and it gives a lot of dimension to pieces. Like I also have this text print in this particular Azure Guys kit. And that's going to look so good next to that floral if you can see how those two work together. So matching the colors as you go along is kind of a skill, but a lot of personal preference. Just what do you like? What kind of combinations make you happy? Okay, so now we're going to keep matching to 8 more, and these ones are going to be, I love that. See how it looks together? These ones are going to be the end block. So this piece and this piece, this right here and this piece up here is what we're working on now. So we're going to make these strips. And you do still have time to change your mind if you decide that the first are just gushing over right now. So we're going to keep putting these together, and we're going to do 8 of these. So I've done 1.
Hold on, it's frozen.
I think it freezes when you touch this.
I think I touched the button.
Did you end it?
It says live stuff.
Sorry, guys, technical difficulties.
Back now.
Okay, so we're just feeding these pieces. We haven't gone very far since I froze, I hope. But these pieces and these pieces, and there are 8 of them, and this is number 2. So 1, 2, I guess. I like that. I mean, you do kind of want to think about which pieces you want to have on the end and just keep everything really kind of scrappy. I can't count when I'm sewing and talking. I think that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Does anybody have questions at this point about how I'm choosing fabrics or what I'm doing to like get sparkle in my you can put that in the chat and I will answer because I have somebody reading the chat even though I'm sewing. And even if you think it's a silly question, I am very, very thrilled to answer it for you because I don't believe in silly questions. Okay, almost done. And then let's see, I do love that. I do love that black and white polka dot. It is such a great dot. It's going to read as kind of a high contrast gray in the actual pincushion. So let's see, we're almost done with this portion. And then we are going to flip everything around. This is my 1/4 inch foot with a guide, and it's going to be a lot more helpful later. And right now it's honestly a little bit annoying. Well, no, right now it's not annoying. When you do those diagonals, it is a little bit annoying. Okay. A 1/4 inch foot without a guide would be less annoying at that stage, but then you just have to flip it, like you have to switch it. And so I just decided to be annoyed slightly and just have it for the rest of the pincushion rather than switch back and forth. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and those are our centers. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So these are this is basically almost all of the pincushion. Oops, I did forget one thing because I'm not following the pattern. We are going to put 2 low volume groups together. And you can choose the 4 you like the best, that you want nice in the middle. I think that this is going to look really, really pretty. Let's see if I like that better. Okay, so right now I am on step, so I'm doing everything a little bit out of order, but this is the order that I do it in. So I just did step 4 right here. This is step 4. And now we're going to skip down to step 8 where we're sewing those pairs together, if you see that on the pattern. So we're going to make this step 8 pairs at the same time just to kind of batch everything. And it makes it go just a teensy bit faster. And it keeps your brain kind of in the same flow space. So I'm going to do it with these. Actually, you know what? I like this a little bit better than I like but I think the texture on that is better. So I'm opting for the texture over the little contrasty X on this one. Both great prints, but I think that adding that little texture is really good in the pincushion once it's all settled. Okay, so now we have done pieces of step 1 through 8 just to batch sew things so that you don't have to get up and down and up and down. These 2 pieces that we just did for step 8, they don't have anything else added to them. So we're going to set them aside, and I'm going to set them right here so maybe you can see them. And then we are going to cut these pieces apart.
Your Bernina flavors?
Yes, it's number 57.
You recommend 37?
I think 37 would be slightly easier for the diagonal pieces. 57 is better for this itty bitty patchwork. It's going to keep your seam allowance super consistent. Better than anything else ever found to keep seam allowances consistent. I know that almost every presser foot plate, this plate underneath, has marks on it. This piece goes here. So I try and keep my piles separate. So this pile is my middles, or sorry, my ends. This pile is my middles that I'm working on right now. And then I have all of my diagonals. You have your left to right diagonal and your right to left diagonal, and I keep those separated from each other. So I'm just sorting everything just like this. It looks like my foot caught this a little bit, so I'm just going to use my seam ripper and loosen up that corner. Okay, so we should be good. Okay, we are going to, since I'm leading the charge, we are going to just cut all of these pieces off, leaving a nice little seam allowance for ourselves. Not right now. Thank you. Just cut that inside. And then we're going to do the same thing on the opposite. So you're just following the same line as the seam, and you're trimming off that little corner.
Question from what is your stitch length and what kind of machine are you sewing with?
Hey Marcia, I am using a Bernina 440 QE, and I've had it for 14 years or so. And I highly, highly recommend this machine. I have sewn on my machine and then gone on to hunt one down on eBay because they are discontinued. And my stitch length right now is 2.4. It is the stitch length I use 99% of the time, and the only time I change my stitch length is when I am doing quilting or basting. So it's just pretty consistent. So I'm going to press these right now. Let's see if I can carefully move this over with me, or somebody else can. We're going to go over to the pressing board. Okay, so we are going to press right here on my kitchen counter. And here is one of the tricks for getting this to go together smoothly. We are going to press all of these one direction and all of these the other direction. So I'm going to pick up this piece right here, and I am going to push its seam towards the dark side on this one, because we want these seams to be nice and locked. And I just stack mine. You're just kind of reinforcing the pressing on the one below it as I do this. Okay, and I've done almost all of them. I'm just going to push those out and try and keep, you don't want to stretch it. You'll notice I'm not using any steam. I do not recommend steam at this point. I really recommend starch at this point. So we've got those ready for the next step, and we'll just put them back over on my sewing table. And now for these, we're going to press them the exact opposite direction. We are going to press them towards the like this. And when we go to put them together, they will just click into place. Let's see if you can see that. I can press it where you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay. We'll do another one. Oopsies. It's a lot harder at that angle. Okay, okay, so these ones are all being pressed towards the left side like that. And I don't even press at this point the pairs. So we're gonna go back over here, and we're basically gonna do everything we just did with the exception of your little low volume squares. We're gonna do it all over again. So we're gonna start with these strips going diagonally, and we're going to pair up another one, and now we want everything to be parallel. So we're going to feed it back through the machine basically the same way, just going corner corner, just like this. And this, if you've never chain pieced before, I will often go through any pattern that I'm going to make and find all the steps that are basically in alignment with each other. Oh, and that is not in alignment with itself. That's actually going to be great for me to show you later how to work with something that's not entirely perfect. Anyway, so some things, I'm going to use that one for that one and this one for this one. My brain went, I am not always focused. But when I'm doing other patterns, whether they're my patterns or anybody else's patterns, I will go through there and see how I can save time by batching my work. It's not a bad habit to have. Just see, okay, if I do this one and this one at the exact same time, I will end up, with an extra 40 minutes or whatever. Okay, and I'm putting a text print next to a text print. I almost never do that. But this text print they're so different in scale and in color that I think I can get away with it. And you'll notice I'm just sweeping parallel, I think, talking while sewing, and I don't know how much I recommend trying to do that, but everything is as parallel, it should be parallel. Luckily I have a scrap in case I can just go back and refer to it. And I've made several of these, and on one of them I was just so distracted and I made a massive mistake, and that scrap came in super handy. So highly recommend having just a little bit extra. You don't have to have a lot extra, just enough to save you if something goes wrong. Okay, nicely on the diagonal, and we are almost done with these star points, and that is what these are. These are the star points. Super close. And then we're going to feed all of the pieces back through the machine, being mindful of the middles and the edges, which, if you don't count and you're not paying attention, you end up having to seam rip it apart, because you can redo anything that you sew wrong. You just can't do it cut wrong. And on one of these star points, I had sewn it wrong and then cut it wrong. So these are my 4 that are the middles. So I'm going to pair up, place something on the outside, if you can see that. And we're just going to put it back through the night. You'll notice I didn't bother pressing these, and that is because we're going to have to press them again. So we're just batching our work as much as humanly possible. And this is not, I know people have asked me this a lot, this is not how you make the big ones. The methods are significantly different to make those go a lot faster as well. And this is just very, very demure, very mindful because you're doing them one at a time. Okay. And I think I've only done 2. Funny, when you're talking, things go both faster and slower. And you can't, like, counting and talking and sewing is apparently the limit of what I am capable of. Do you guys have any more questions? I'm going to work on these. I'm going to finish it up for just a couple of seconds. I think I may have dropped one of my 1-inch squares. I am 1 short, and that shouldn't be cool. Okay, so those are all my centers, and now I'm switching over to doing the edges. So you just pair up, instead of putting the low volume on the other side of the blue, you're going to put the low volume on the low volume side. And so at this point, it is actually going to be important for you to pay attention to the contrast in your own low volume pieces. So like what you don't want is to have like this next to this piece again. Then you completely lose that scrappy feeling. But if you put this piece next to this piece or this piece next to this piece, you get that contrast that you want that gives you that really vintage, scrappy vibe. So contrast is really the name of the game when it comes to making low volume quilts. You need to ensure that it's not just white, and that is the biggest mistake I see people make, is lots and lots of just white prints, and that is going to yield a very, very boring, flat background. And I did not miss a single piece, I guess. Good job for me. So like these two would be a good combination. You can see that this print has a bigger motif. It's kind of spread out. The trick for these pincushions is teeny, teeny, tiny prints, by the way. It's one of the reasons that I know I can make beautiful kits of that in lots of colors, but the print cells, a lot of people don't keep these teeny prints alive or around because they don't necessarily pop super great in. Here's another, you can see kind of a faded, muted, low volume. Sorry, faded, muted, and then like this much louder piece. Or I could use that one. The lighting in here is really yellow, much to my chagrin, but let me see what I have left. So at this point, kind of evaluating which low volumes I have left, and I can kind of pair up what I want. So I'm going to use this one with this one, if you can see it, after all. So it should be almost exactly precise how many pieces you need of the low volumes. And then we'll just do these last few. And we're going to have the sparkliest little pincushion you ever did see. I did a poll on my stories about, did you want to do the whole pincushion or did you want like a Food Network kind of recipe? And it was 50-50. So I just decided to do the whole thing, and you can always refer back to it if there's any step that you're like, how did she do that? So here's my last piece. They're very similar, but a lot of that is the lighting in here because one is much more blue and one is much more brown. I would never ever recommend choosing fabrics under artificial light. I know that that's a really unusual thing to say, but especially LED lights are terrible for it. We're just going to cut these little things apart and stick them to the side, and now we are going to go press everything. So those are all of my, I don't know if you can see all of this, but these are all of my end pieces. So they're going to look like this. Now these are going to be my middle pieces, and I just use a seam ripper to cut these things apart rather than having to wear out my joints using scissors. So those are my centers. Those are my low volumes, and now here are my star points. Does anybody have any questions at this point? So star point going that direction, and star points going this direction. Even with these little teeny tiny pieces, I do not change my seam allowance. They're tinier, and I do not have any problems with them coming apart. So we're just going to repeat what we did before, where we snip the corners off. And we small to save unless you can find a cute project. And if you find a cute project, ooh, hold on. Those are right. 1, 2, 3 going that direction, the fourth one for that direction. Okay, so if you can see, there's a seam right there. And we're just going to clip right next to the seam. I might have a prize for someone if they can something to do with these itty bitty scraps. I hate throwing scraps away, but you know, at this point they're really confetti. So we're just going to keep clipping those. Almost done. And then we're going to move back over to the pressing board. And at this point on the pressing board, you can use starch. I still do not recommend steam ever, 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 and really not on little itty bitty projects like this, because the steam is going to distort your pieces. So I'm going to move all my pieces over to my cutting board or pressing board. And I'm just going to kind of try and keep it all a little bit organized. Okay. You know what? I'm going to put my on top because reaching over was really hard. Okay, so I have my little scrap. It does not look like I'm going to need to use it. So you can put that in your scrap pile, or if it's too small to save, you can trash it, whichever works best for you. Here's my pieces of my pink one. Okay, so we're done cutting, but we're not done pressing. So I'm going to move everything over on top. And now we're going to start pressing these pieces, and we are going to press the same direction, or I guess the opposite direction. So if I press this one to the low volume side or up and out, I'm still going to press this one towards the low volume side, but it's going to be down and out. But I hope nobody here and out. We're just going to, hopefully you can see that. We're going to press this one this direction. Do you see how that works? So they're going the same, toward the same colorway. And again, we're doing this so that things lock together. This is not how you press the big ones, by the way, but this is how you press the little ones. Okay. So these are all nice and I may just leave my iron on them for just a second and let them cool as flat as possible. And again, you can use starch. I am not going to a next step just because it does not make sense for me. But now we're going those other directions, and you can see I'm doing the seam allowance towards the dark part on these ones, like that. Oops. And this is just going to create that locked seam that I think is a more durable seam, also a nice smooth seam, and your sewing machine will appreciate sewing under things that match up. Hopefully you can see that. Does anybody have any questions about why I am pressing the way I am pressing? And I do press on top of the other ones. Like I said, it's almost like double pressing the ones below, and you're going to get even flatter seams. And it's just a habit that I have developed, and I'm not sure I could even give it up if somebody said, don't do that again. So press all of those as flat as possible. And I'm going to set them over there to cool off. Okay, so now I'm going to pull out my two little seams, and I am going to trim off long threads that I do not need on them. One of the bonuses of chain piecing is you save a ton of thread. And so now what I'm going to do on this piece is I'm going to determine which piece I think is the darkest side. And I know you're probably going to be surprised, but I actually believe that this is going to read darker than this. So I am going to, let me hold it up to the light. It's close, but I'm going to press towards the pink side like that. And because they're so small, almost as soon as them, they just kind of like your seam allowance going. So I want to make sure that whatever I put underneath the seam allowance goes the opposite direction. And yes, I'm very happy with my choice. That floral does read darker than the polka dot. So get that nice and flat. Those two are going to go together, and that's the center of your block. We'll set those right there. And now we're going to do our middle pieces. And one of my middle pieces, there it is. So for these middles, I am going to press the seam allowance towards the middle without burning myself. I need to get one of those irons. But we're going to press all the middles towards the middle. And this one is the harder of the two pressing jobs for these little strips. It's actually much easier to press them both out than to press them both in. But we are going to do it anyway. And again, this is to get a nice locking seam. It's going to make a really pointy point, really nice transitions between the blocks. If it's nice and flat and it clicks together. You can, if it is your habit, you can press open here. It's not going to make a huge difference. This is just how I prefer to press it. There's no quilt police. Nobody's going to come over and tell you you did it wrong. Okay, and you can turn them over if you want and just make sure they are extra flat. This one was a bit foolish to me. So we're going to set those right there. So now you've got all those middles done, and you will find that these are so much easier. You just pop open and you press like that. I really like this portion of it. This is like kind of therapeutic. I mean, nice and in my flow. I really enjoyed making just this quick little block that gives so much sparkle and my sewing room so much prettier. I've made several. I think I'm going to give a few away as gifts, just to brighten people's day. I think right now everybody is just dealing with heavy things. Everybody I know is dealing with something really heavy. And so if we can go around and just brighten the day for anybody, I know, you know how they talk about kicking the cat, but you know that when somebody does something nice for you, a lot of times it gives you more grace for someone later if you feel a little put upon. So I'm just going to use my little pincushions to see if we can make this world a little bit better, a little bit nicer. Okay, whoopsies. So now I have everything pressed. We have all of the middle pieces. We have all of these end pieces. We have our center blocks. We have everything pressed. You can see this is exactly where I am with this piece. Well, it's not exactly. I've got my 9 patches together for my bubble gums. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with these, and this is where the countdown begins. I don't know if anybody else does this, but this is where I'm like, okay, I have, 4 seams here, and then, I start to kind of count down how many seams I have left. So first I'm going to take my star points, and I'm going to move over here, and I'm going to feed them through my machine. Now, you can really toy with these in that you can turn them around like this, and you can just make it look where you want, how you want the low volumes to kind of kiss here at the top, how you want them down here at the bottom. Kind of keep in mind which 4 prints you used on your center square, and I try to avoid putting any of these at the bottom point that is going to intersect with them if I can avoid it, and that way I don't have any low volume repeats towards the end. Okay, we're just going to feed these through very carefully using that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that is really important. We just have to really focus on getting accurate seam allowances, and we want to make sure we don't have any prints that are exactly the same. So here's, I think I just did one that has this text print. Oh, nope, it was a different floral. So this works really well. Nothing is repeated. It's not going to look the same. And I think I'm going to flip this one around because I didn't like having that low volume print on both sides of that. So you can just kind of play with it as you go. Just be a little mindful of what the next step is going to be and what prints are going to be touching. Did the iron do something? Oh. I have an Oliso iron. I've had that iron for 12 years almost, I think. I have a pink one and I have this black one. The pink one I used water in and it didn't last as long, but this black one has lasted forever and ever. It's one of the reasons that I don't recommend steam. It will ruin your iron a lot faster. Although some irons are better at managing water than others. My mom has a Rowenta. I think she's had it for a million years. And it handles steam just fine. Okay, so we've done our star points, and now we're going to put together our center block. Not a center block, but center block. So that again, now you've tackled step 8, 1, 2, and 3, and maybe 4. I don't know where my pattern went. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we have now tackled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 are totally done. So next up is step 7, where we are going to be taking these little strips and creating our little 9 patches. And after this, we assemble the block, and then I'll show you how I quilt it, and we'll do it as fast as possible, but also as correctly as possible. Okay, so now we're just going to kind of plan out our little nine patches. And again, we don't want too many repeats. We don't want low volumes to touch each other. We want a good variation in the volume of even the darker prints. So like on this one, you can see that a lighter, this is kind of middle, this is kind of dark. That's going to make a nice little block. And you can see I don't have any low volumes that are touching. And so I really like this one. And I am going to set this piece right here that I know I'm going to need later aside in the first position. And then I'm going to match these up. And this is going to be the first one through the machine. So I kind of keep it straight as I go in that manner. And now we can set up the next one. We have just so many cute little pieces here. Let's see, I'll do these 3. I like that. I think I like that. And then I have these little itty bitty flowers. And this one looks like it's not perfect. So this is the one I think I fed it through the machine and I was like, guys, it's not going to be perfect. These ones, if you stretch them right. But I'm going to show you a little bit how I get that to look perfect when I'm done. Not super precise. Okay, so these are going to be my pieces. So this is block number 2 going through the machine. So that is going to go into that second position there. And we're going to lock these seams. I don't know if you can see that. I want those nice and locked so that you're going to get nice pointy points, and you can really feel it with your thumbs. If you feel along the seam, you'll feel there's a gap or an overlap, so you can have it be nice and accurate. And then the other, as you're feeding these through the machine, do not try and stretch anything unless you need to stretch something. I wouldn't recommend stretching though. Okay, here's number 3. We're just going to put that in the third position. And we're going to lock these seams nice and tight. Going to feed it through the machine without stretching the top or distorting. Sometimes with these little pieces, I like to have tweezers. These aren't so small that I feel like I need tweezers, but that's an option if you feel like you can't get it. Okay, so now with these ones, you can see that I did not sew it completely straight. It's pretty close when I actually open it up. And I'm still going to use the same method. I'm just going to make sure that those are going, and you can pin it if you want. You're just going to want to make sure it goes all the way to the edge. It's going to look just fine. People ask me, is this a beginner-friendly pattern? All my patterns, I think, are beginner-friendly if you follow directions, maybe with the exception of Golden Afternoon or Festive, a little bit trickier. Okay, there's 4 of those. Okay, so those are our 4 blocks, and this one is block 1. So I'm just going to put it up with its friend, put block 2. I don't know if you can see all of this. My cameraman walked away. But here's, can they see it, Britton? Okay, so here's block 1 and its pair, block 2 and its pair, and I'm just pairing everything up so that I don't make any more mistakes. And then I'm just going to cut these pieces apart and set them aside for when I'm ready to press everything again. Okay, and if you open these up, if you want to just take a little peek, you should have extremely pointy points. Okay, hopefully that. If you want to just peek at your little points, that's what they should look like because of those nice locking seams, and because you've been paying attention all the way along to all those seam allowances and little things, you're going to have a nice block right there. So we're at an hour. This is going to be saved. You can refer back to it. We are very, very close to having our whole block done. I don't have anywhere I have to be really today. I've kind of blocked out my day for this. So I'm going to show you all the way to the end. We're going to quote this and everything, unless you would like me to skip ahead. If anybody is like, please just skip ahead, just tell me and I can do it because I do have the pieces ready to go for future steps. Okay. We're just pairing it up just like we did before. We are matching the seam, and we want to make sure that we feel them with our thumbs. A lot of quilting is really by feel. You want to make sure that that seam is nice and flat. There's not a gap between them, but also that they don't overlap, and your fingers can feel that kind of stuff. So we're just gonna put it through, and then we're going to put together the 9 patch that is our block. My machine thinks that I need to put the presser foot down before I sew. Okay. Hopefully I've seen, is there anything that you've learned or anything that like resonated with you as we've gone along? I would love to hear it because sometimes I wonder, am I just talking to myself? But these are all that I think I wish I would have known 10 years ago and that I have kind of learned through trial and error. And if I can make that easier on somebody else, then I absolutely will. Okay, so your seams should be nice and nice 1/4 inch seams. We're going to cut these apart, and then we're going to move over and we're going to press them one more time. So I think these are all cut apart. Yep. Okay, so we're going to go over here, and pretty much what we want to do is everything is going to get pressed to the side except these. And your star points, I highly recommend pressing that seam open just to reduce bulk later on when you want to go and stitch these together. So I just kind of finger press it open, take my iron and run it down the center of this seam. Oh, good. That makes me really happy. Thank you. Okay, because I do wonder sometimes, am I just talking to Amanda of a couple years ago? Okay, and then we're just going to open these up. You can, again, these are, if you don't have fingernails, a seam ripper or tweezers help open seams and also help you so you don't burn yourself on your iron if you need it. You can hold those down instead of using your fingers. These are pretty well behaved, but you should see really perfect points to be just really, I'm not trying to boast here, but they should be pretty perfect if you followed the instructions. Here's another one. I'll press it open so you can see it, but there shouldn't be a lot of overhang. And what you should see, and I'll show you this in just a second, is your seam allowance should be right at about 1/4 inch, maybe a scant 1/4 inch, but it should be right about 1/4 inch. So that, and just make sure, and you can kind of just check, okay, oh, let's see, and see that that one is just a hair shy of 1/4 inch on one side, and that's something to just kind of be aware of because we want that point to be nice and pointy once it's put together in the block. And I do trim these just a tad if necessary. Oh, I have more of these to go. But I don't think on this particular one it'll be necessary unless you would like to see what I would trim it if it needed trimming. Like if you notice one is like really, really out of alignment, then you can trim it. You can hear Coco in the back. She is protecting her snuggle puppy, which is like her baby that she carries around. Okay, so another basically perfect point. So just like that, that is what we want it to look like. And you want this nice little seam allowance here at the bottom. And when you take the 1/4 inch seam allowance here and the 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're going to get a nice little perfect point up at the top too. Okay, so those are all of those. And then these are easier. I don't worry as much about bulk on these. You can press these open. I just press these flat. I run my point of my iron right up the middle. And you know, these are by far, could I get my best press? These are by far the pieces that resist laying flat the most. And no guilt at all getting them to lay down. It's just going to make it easier at the next step. You don't want them soaking wet, but you do want them nice and flat. And you don't want them stretched out. I'll show you a little stretch that happened on this just with that starch. You can kind of see how it is stretching up here at the top. It's not terrible and it's not going to really distort my block, but it is there. That is what these should look like. And you can see that even these little patchwork points should be just exactly right. So we're going to press that one flat. Do it again here. And you can also see that there's not a ton of thread hanging off the edges, and that is due to the chain piecing. So if you think about all the thread you have to trim, that's just wasted thread. And unless you have a box of thread that's too small to save, I know people who save stuff like that. Oh, there we go. I missed it and got the iron instead. And if you are thinking, oh my God, I'm making mistakes, just slow down. I feel like I am trying to rush a little bit. And I do worry that I'm going to make a mistake because of it. So you can go slow. This video is going to stay at this link forever and ever and ever in perpetuity. And so you can kind of refer back to it anytime you need to. This piece is a little bit mangled, so it is absolutely going to need to be trimmed. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Hold on. And I don't know how I did it. That's usually how mistakes happen. But I'm also going to show you how human I am. Okay, you can see here that this piece is way long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that before I sew it into my pincushion, I have trimmed it down so that it does not distort the block itself. You can make mistakes. There's almost any mistake you make quilting, you can fix. Even if you cut things the wrong direction. Okay, that's my last one. Do I have any questions at this point? Okay. I am going to take my pieces and I'm going to set them here so I can move my pressing again. And you can, I feel like these weren't as flat as I would have liked, so I'm just going to flatten them a little bit more. We'll set my iron over there. And looks like I'm going to have several new pincushions today. I can't even wait to show you guys in my Instagram. Okay, so I had this little misbehaving block over here. Where is it? There it is. And I just think that it's going to distort everything. This block should be 2 inches. And I can see that somehow I overhang this one and this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up and I'm going to square up this block. The middle should be a 1/2 inch across like this. So you can line up your ruler's lines with the 1/2 inch blocks to make sure that you are where you want to be. And then you can just trim off the pieces that are no longer serving you. You can turn it and just make sure that it's right. And the other sides are great, so I'm not super worried about the rest of it, but it looks much, much better now. Maybe I'll just get that little corner. And you can do this to all of your blocks. On anything bigger than this, I absolutely would never skip this step. Aren't they so tiny? So tiny. Do you guys want me to do one? Do you understand what I did? This one doesn't really need it. Just in case, you're going to line up those marks in the middle. It should be 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch across like that. And then just make sure that it's in straight so that those marks go right up that seam. And then if necessary, you can just trim off anything extra. It's basically threads. But the other thing that you're doing at this juncture when you trim like that is you are getting rid of any extra thread that is overhanging. So the block that you end up working on in the end isn't going to have a million overhanging threads in the back. They're just going to be these nice, tight, clean. Okay, let's put the block together. This is the fun part, right? Is everybody excited? We're going to actually assemble our block. So before I do it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay out how I want it to go together. I've got, if you'll notice, just when you lay it out, I've somehow ended up with the same print in the same place, and I don't want. So I'm going to flip this one like that. And I think that's the only change I'm going to make, really. Okay, next we're going to get our points. We're going to put our points in here just like this. And now you can see that I have this piece with this piece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put it here, although then I have that piece with that piece. So I can just kind of toy around with how I like the layout until it makes me happy. But I do try and avoid having pieces touch pieces that are the same as them. Let's see. Like I said, you just kind of play with it until you're happy with the outcome. I want this piece down here, which means I'm going to turn that piece right like that. And I'm going to turn this back like that. And then I'm going to put it like that. Okay. And then I have my center. And what I don't want is this piece next to that piece so that they are as far apart as possible. So this is what my block is going to look like once it all comes together. I'm just going to take 1, 2, 3. That's number 1. 1, 2, 3. That is row number 2. And 1, 2, 3. And that is row 3. And I've got them right over here. And then I'm going to do a lot like I did before, where these two are going to go together under my machine, and I'm going to move this one into the first position over there. And we're going to do a nice 1/4 inch all the way down. And I know that I always work left to right when I pull my things up, and it's habits like that that will really help you stay organized later on. Okay, another nice little, I will say that when I am sewing these star points underneath my machine, I don't know if you can see these, okay, you can see where the point is on the back side. If you sew a tiny hair above that, you are going to get a nice point. When I say a tiny hair, like a sliver, the tiniest little piece. So I always sew with that star point up when I'm sewing the star points. And I pay attention as I feed it through the machine to where that goes. And I'm actually going to pull it out, even normally pull it out, but I'm going to show you, whoopsies, what I mean. Hopefully, can you see that? You pull it open and you've got your star point. Just absolutely perfect. And I'll do it again. I want to see it. So I'm going to put these two together, put this one right on top like that. And you can look this direction and you can see where the seams line up. And then you can feed it through your machine with that star point up and just paying attention to where the point is as you feed it. And for me, it's right at that 1/4 inch mark. I'm not having to modify it at all. But if it's not, you can really modify it to get exactly what you want. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that portion? Okay, let's feed everything else right on through. And then we're going to press it one more time. Then we're going to have a block. Then we're going to cut borders. I guess I'll do a poll. Do you guys want to watch me quilt it and put the back on it and turn it right side out? Or is that something rather I send you as a separate video later on? Is anybody answering?
No answers, but I say maybe a separate video.
Okay, I'm going to make the block. I'm going to show you how to put on the borders, and then I'll do a separate that I'll just email out that shows how to quilt it, put the back on, and turn it right side out. Because I do know that the class, but also it's a class, and you're really hopefully learning a little. So I just pulled this one off the machine, and you can see that that point, once I press it, is going to be just a nice little kiss. They connect to create the motif without overlapping too much. You kind of want pretty delicate connections on these. Okay, last one. Okay, now we're going to press it one more time so that these seams come together. And pressing is part of accuracy. I said 50-50 seam allowance and cutting earlier, but I would actually I would actually say that it's like 47.5, 47.5, and then 5% pressing. If you don't press, you're not going to get good results. So on this one, on the middle piece with our points, I'm going to press my seams to the middle. You can also press open. This is one of the bulkiest steps that you're working on right now. And you can see, I know people talk about like press, shimmy my iron just a teeny tiny bit. It's not like pushing, it's just pressing and like a little shimmy. And then on these two pieces, I'm going to press it nice and open like that. Okay. And now again, you're going to end up with pieces that just click into place. And I may starch that just a little bit. I actually have heard best press is not starch. It's something else altogether. It's a starch and sizing alternative. I use the scent-free kind. It's my favorite. I don't actually like starch, like the starch you would get at the store, because it will leave a residue on what you're working on. And there we go. Have to remember which direction that goes together. And last but not least, so I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that there's just so many seams and so much thread. And so I am going to do one more for the sake of accuracy. And you can make this judgment for yourself, but I am just going to trim the middle. Oopsies, Britton, this is hot. Don't touch it. I am going to just carefully, just line up my ruler here and get this nice and straight. And there's not a lot to trim off. I mean, this is what I just trimmed off. It's so tiny, but look at how much cleaner that looks. Just by taking that 2 seconds to make sure that this edge is nice and straight. When you're trimming this, you'll want to pay attention to where this 1/4 inch mark is right here on your star point, because you don't want to trim off your seam allowance. That's really, really a bad thing. But you can trim off just the threads that are making it look a little goofy. Like you can see on this one, there's like a nice overwhelming thread. It kind of looks a little jiggity jaggedy, and we're going to just line it up, making sure that we're straight. And we're going to trim off the thing that's not serving us. Okay, so that should go together very, very neatly at this point. Are you guys excited? Fun, right? Okay, so we're going to go back over here. I don't know if you guys have ever sewn standing up, but it's a very different experience, actually. And we are going to focus almost entirely on keeping these seams right here all lined up, these ones in the middle. And if you want, you can pin it. I actually think pins might distort it a teeny tiny bit, but let's try. So we want this seam with the blue and the white to click into these 2 low volume seams, just like that. Okay. And then we're going to do it again over here. And we want this blue seam to click right into that low volume seam like that. And if you want, you can pin it, you can not pin it. It's so tiny, it's kind of silly. And then once you've done that, you should notice that the center seam is going to line right up. And then you're going to feed it through at 1/4 of an inch and pull out the pins as you get to them. Or, you know, be a rebel and sew right over them. It's up to you. And then we're going to flip it over and do it again on the other side. But you should see nice points all the way around your star block. And that's what we're going for. We want nice points on every corner, every edge. I want you guys to make this, and every time you look at it, be like, oh my goodness, that was the best 2 hours of my week. Okay. And again, I am sewing with these star points up so that I can pay attention to where my needle goes over them. Kind of experiment. I've never done it with pins and then without on one side and the other, so we'll see how it looks when I open it up. Fingers crossed I don't need to rip out that side. Nope, we're good. Okay, so this is the finished block. And now I'm going to show you how to put on borders. And this border technique that I'm going to show you is good for both little tiny projects like this, but also so great for big projects. Could I get the iron really quick? And at this point, you just want it. You can set it down. Thanks, baby. Okay, you just want it really, really full. You can press that seam open. You can press that seam to the side. But what we want is a nice, stiff, flat piece of fabric that we can work with for quilting and putting on the border. And remember, you can always flip it around. I don't have a rotating pressing board or a rotating board. I know some people swear by them. I don't really need them, and I am not a gadget girl. Like, I want it simple. I want to use the basics. I don't want to distort my star block. So I'm going to go in all the different directions. Okay, so here's how we're going to do borders for this particular. You can actually just set it on the counter face down. It has feet. Okay. So step one is we're going to trim it down so that it's perfect. Okay. And we are going to put that center. This is a 4.5 inch Creative Grids ruler. You're going to put that center line right on the middle of the block. And you are going to keep everything as straight as possible to trim. Okay, and once you have done all your trimming and you're very satisfied with the shape and the edge of your block, you are going to measure it. Okay, and on a block this size, we are going to measure to within 1/8 of an inch. So my block finished at exactly 4.5 inches on every side. Yours may be different based on your seam allowance, but this is a 4.5 inch block. So here is my border piece. You guys got this in your kit. It's the strip, and you're going to measure 2 1 inch by 4.5 inch pieces. Now, because my block is perfectly square, that works. If my block were not perfectly square, I would measure this side and this side. And on a quilt, those are going to be different, and they may be different by 1 inch or more. And then you're going to add those two numbers together. You're going to divide that number in half, and that is the number you're going to use for your borders. This one should be 4.5 inches. Hopefully yours is very similar to mine, but if yours is 4 1/8 inch or 4 1/4 inch, or 4 3/8, just measure to within 1/8 of an inch, add both sides together, and then divide by 2 and cut that length. So here's my borders. And what I'm going to say is, if you want me to keep going, do you guys want me to keep going? I'm seeing like the numbers are kind of changing, but here's the borders, just like that. And once I put those on with my quarter inch seam allowance, this is 4.5. These are going to be 3/4. So I'm going to need to cut it. I think my pattern says 6. Brittany, can you hand me the pattern, please? I think it's 6 inches is right. We are, just so you know, we're here at step 14. We have done, or step 12. We have done all the way through step 11 at this point. So we're going to straighten the block. Okay, don't trim off that seam allowance. And then you're going to cut these pieces. So this one gets cut at 4.5 inches, and these, I believe, are going to be cut at 6. So let's go feed it through the machine one more time. Just like this. And when you're feeding something that has patchwork on one side and a solid piece on the other side, always feed your patchwork side that has all the seams through face up. There's a lot of good reasons for this, but the biggest one is so that you don't get your seams twisted unnecessarily. Okay, and we're going to just flip it over to the other side. Gosh, this one's so pretty. I knew it would be pretty when I picked out the fabric, and I don't need to toot my own horn, but it is so pretty. I pulled in a lot of out of print fabrics in the different kits to kind of give them, you know, something special. Okay, and we are just going to press these with the seam going towards, hopefully you can, seam needs to go towards the solid side, the side of least resistance. And I am going to just really, really fast press it. Again, pressing does make a significant difference in the product that you are able to produce. Okay, just like that, and just like that. Okay, we're just going to flip it over and make sure it's nice and flat. And now it's time to cut our final border piece. And I will keep recording, but you don't have to stick around if you don't want to, on how I'm going to quilt it. You know, at this point is where I'm realizing that the ruler that I'm missing is the ruler that I needed. Okay, so I need it to be, I'm going to measure up here or on any horizontal line. It's actually 5.5 inches. So I need to cut a 5.5 inch by 1 piece, and my ruler is only a 4.5 inch ruler. So I'm going to improvise. Hopefully you guys have the right ruler somewhere near. Mine has gone on vacation. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be a half. Whoopsies. Okay. And that is going to be my final border. Okay. I should have packed snacks for this, you guys. My stomach is starting to tell me that it's lunchtime. Maybe I'll go grab myself some Chick-fil-A for lunch today. It sounds really delicious. 4.5, 5.5. I do not love having to improvise. We used the ruler in the shop, and nobody knows exactly where it went from there. Okay, so here we are, last 2 pieces. Do you guys need to watch this part? Let's show it to you. Okay. Okay, we're gonna come back one more time to the sewing machine. This is kind of the last thing we're gonna do over here, and until we quilt it. And we're going to put that down. And you don't want to stretch it. That's the big thing. You do not want to stretch these seams as you're putting them through. You want everything to be just so accurate. There's one side. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And last but not least, look at us. We did this. We did it. Oh, yeah, that's a big one. It's a good tip. I forget who I learned it from, but it was before I moved into this house, so it's been a while. But it definitely keeps you from twisting seams that you don't need to twist. All right. And now we have the block. There it is in all of its perfection glory. Let's do it overhead. Thanks, Britt. My son is my helper right now, you guys. My husband has been helping. My son is doing it. Hopefully you learned something today, anything, and it was fun. I'd love to see it. If you made your block, please, pretty please tag me on Instagram. It would be so encouraging for me. So here it is. And your next step, if you want to keep going right now, is you put your batting. You're going to put this on top of the batting. You're going to put the batting on top of your solid that we included, just like this. And then you're going to stitch all the way around the edges and then quilt it however you like. I think on this one, I'll probably do just some simple, I'll probably do simple straight lines like I did on the first one. I'm going to show you kind of different quilting things I did. So I did straight lines on this one, if you can see that. And I think I'm going to do straight lines on this one. And then on this one, I did cross hatch lines. They went across. And you can see how they make nice little X's. And then on this one, I free motion quilted it, just like this. And I'm not super thrilled with the result, but it's nice little, I don't know if you can see, it's like waves or crescents. I think the straight lines on this itty bitty block make a much bigger impact, but you can use it however you prefer. I will do a video that I will post an email out that shows me basting it, which is actually, we can baste it if you guys want to. Do you guys want to baste it? Or do you have other things? I know that we've been here a while. Nobody? Okay. I'll just baste it really quick. We'll just go over here and I'll show you what I do. So for basting, you're going to need to switch out your presser foot to a walking.
People are saying keep going. Where do you normally start?
I'm going to show you. I will show you where I normally start. So let's put our walking feet on. I don't know if the walking foot has a number for Bernina, but it's the best. And that's what we're going to use to quilt. And so I'm going to switch to my zigzag. And then I'm going to make the stitch length, the stitch length on the zigzag, like 4. And I'm going to put my presser foot down, my walking foot down, and I'm going to zigzag the edge all the way around. And I'm going to stop. Every time I stop, I'm going to put my needle down before I pivot. So I'm going to get to the end, put my needle down, lift it, pivot. And then I'm going to go all the way to the edge, put my needle down, lift up my foot. On this one, I'm actually going to modify it a little bit. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end. So you have just made a mini quilt. Okay. This is the part. Okay. This is the part that is actually called quilting. So you basted it all the way around. And then I'm going to switch back to a straight stitch. And I think I'm going to go to a stitch length of 2.9. And where do I start? On this one, I am going to start about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and I'm going to use, my walking foot has lines on it, and I am going to use the line. It has like an inner and an outer like opening, and I'm going to use the inner opening as where I'm going to start. And then I'm just going to go straight down like that. I'm going to get to the end. I'm going to pick it up, and now for the distance that I want everything apart, I'm going to run the edge of my walking foot down the seam I already made. And that is going to be how I determine distance for the rest of this quilting. Okay, you're just going to go to the end, and we're just going to keep going. I do love straight line quilting because it is so fast. So fast. Like we're a third of the way done. And there we are. Now we're nearly half. And if your lines curve a teeny bit, it's really not a huge deal because honestly, the entire pincushion is going to curve a tiny bit and it's not going to be noticeable. You can also use the seams as guides if you would prefer. Just whatever, honestly, it's very easy, like low stressing. I'll show you what my stitch length looks like in a second. It's not much longer, but the longer the stitch length, the faster it's going to sew. And it looks like I have made an error, and I'm going to show it just a second so that you can see what it looks like, and I'll show you how I fix it. Maybe not. Let's see. If you didn't use your walking foot, you are going to end up with too much fabric here at the end. It looks like mine is portioned pretty well, and I'm not going to need to do it. But if you do end up with too much fabric, and it's like overlapping, okay, you can just seam rip the zigzag off. You don't need to press it, but we are going to need to trim it up again. And again, my regular, my preferred ruler is gone. So we're just going to make do. And we're going to trim off those edges just like that. It is a mini quilt. Isn't it cute? It really is. Like you have just made an entire quilt. Oops, it looks like I did something funky with that edge. Okay. But, you know, it's just a happy little accident. It's not going to be noticeable. Okay, so that is what it looks like at this point. And the only other steps you really have to do is you're going to take your backing, you're going to put it right sides together like this, and you are going to trim the backing. And you can really see that quilting on the back side. Do you see that? Like you can really see how imperfect it is, how human it is. A machine didn't do it, I did it. And I don't know, I don't love perfection to a certain point. So we'll just do that. We'll go put it under our machine, right sides together. This is kind of the last step. So I guess we went all the way to the end together. Us and Lord of the Rings, right? All right, so we're gonna put it in there, and I do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm actually gonna make it a little tighter, back to my 2.4. And we're still gonna keep the walking foot because we're feeding so many layers through the sewing machine. We're going to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge, needle down. We're going to pivot, and we're going to keep going 1/4 inch all the way down. We're going to stop from the edge, put our needle down, do our third side. Oh, got my turning tool. I have a very nice turning tool. I think it's on my sewing machine table, Britt. It's wood, and it has a pointy edge. Okay, on this 4th side, we're going to go like 1.5 inches, and then we're going to back stitch like that. Then we're going to lift up our foot and move it 2 inches away, and then we're going to go 1.5 inches to the edge, making sure we back when we put our needle down. So we have made ourselves this little envelope, and what we're going to do is going to cut these threads because they are going to be restrictive and annoying. Oop, hope I didn't get that. I don't think I did. Then we're going to cut these corners. So get nice pointy corners. You want to leave a little bit of a seam allowance, but not too much of one. Hopefully you see how that looks. So I've got my seam, and then I've got my corner trimmed. We're going to trim all 4 just like that. just like that. Okay, and now it's time to turn. So we're going to take our opening, wherever it is, right here. Okay, and we're going to stick our fingers in. I stick my thumb in and I pinch my corner here, and I just push the whole corner right out like this. And I just keep pulling until I get the whole thing turned. Hopefully you can see all of that. It's not super pretty to watch. We're going to poke out those corners as much as we can. It's okay, Britt. I'll use what I've got. Okay, so we've got all four corners nice and pushed out. And if you want, you can use your scissors. Be very careful. You don't want to poke a hole in the corner. Be gentle. I do have a special tool for this that I cannot seem to find right now. Oh, that'll work. That's a hair marker. Okay, so you can use this hair marker if you have one. A lot of people have these. And just push those corners out like that. Okay, you're going to push that corner out. You don't want to see any dips in the corner. Okay. And then I think I got, nope, this one still has that little funky dip. And if you're really having troubles with one, I don't know where my seam ripper went, you can very, very gently tug at the recessed portion with a seam ripper and very gently pull it out, because we want them as pointy as possible. Isn't it cute? It turned out really well. But yeah, we just want to reel corners as pointy as we can without ripping any seams. And that turning tool really does make a difference. You want something with a nice point to it that you can stick in there and just kind of jam that through. There, it kind of went. I don't know if you guys can see how much better that looks. And just take a second. You don't have to rush. I'm telling myself that right now. I don't have to rush. I'm going to live with this pincushion for a really long time, or somebody is going to get it, and I want them to have a really good product. And I say product like you're going to sell it. I'm not selling it. It's just you want them to have a high quality piece that you've given them. Okay, so all together, the last couple steps. If you made a rice bag, you can take your little rice bag and stick it right in. You guys got this really cool, we bought a vacuum sealer so we could give you enough poof without it taking up too much space in the package. But we're going to get that rice bag in. We're going to put it right on the bottom in the middle so that when you reach out and grab your thing, and that's the only piece that we didn't include because it is so optional. And some people aren't going to want to do that, and I get it. So we've got that in there. Make your floof or your polyfill. I don't know. It's very unprofessional to say floof, I guess. And you're going to jam it in to your thing. And once you've got all your polyfill in, you are going to just kind of whip stitch that seam closed with its seam allowance. Okay, and we're almost at it. We're over an hour and a half, so I appreciate you guys being here. Do we have any questions at any stage of the process? I'm happy to tackle anything that you guys are interested in asking about. Oopsies. Anyway, you will be shocked at how much polyfill goes into this itty bitty pin cushion. Just kind of keep stuffing. And I often like to make sure that the polyfill gets to the corners. Okay, you do not want saggy corners. So just kind of make sure that there's some over there. And once you've got it all in there, I do recommend pinning at this point, but you're going to pin your seam allowances. And what I like to do is I like to fold this over and just kind of pin it to this. And then you whip closed. I don't think I can whip stitch it closed on camera, being totally honest. No. If you want to press your seams open, that is totally, totally fine. The reason I wouldn't recommend it, I have a pin in my mouth. Sorry, guys. Hold on. The only reason I wouldn't recommend pinning a seam open on this one is because it is going to get a little bit of wear and tear from the polyfill that is kind of pushing it open. Now you did quilt it, and that is going to offset some of that wear and tear, but open seams are just a little bit weaker than pressed to the side seams, but it really shouldn't make a huge difference. Then you're just going to pin it. I don't know if you can see how I've got my seam allowance turned in on this side. And then you're just going to whip stitch it closed with a similar matching thread. On this one, I'd probably use a gray thread. Anyway, so that is how you make this little pincushion. Any other questions before we say goodbye for today? And now you guys can see exactly how long it takes from start to finish to make all of these. So you could make, now that you know how to make it and you have the pattern, you've done one, you can make as many as you want and just decorate your entire sewing room with nothing but sonnet pincushions. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really, really appreciate you supporting our shop, supporting our business. It really is a family business, and it makes a big difference to us. So thank you. If you guys have any other questions about the pincushion or along the way, feel free to shoot me an email and I would be happy to respond. Thanks again, guys. Have a good day.